The House Oversight Committee is now demanding answers from the Office of the Inspector General, a guy named Michael Horowitz, somebody who's been very involved investigating Hunter Biden. But we know that all of the people involved in investigating Hunter Biden haven't really been above board. David Weiss, we were told, had all sorts of insight and special permission to go file here and go file there. Turns out, according to the whistleblowers, none of that was true. Leslie Wolf was notifying Hunter's defense team about potential searches of Hunter's storage unit. Know that Secret Service tipped off Biden's transition team when the IRS was going to go interview Hunter outside his residence and so on. And so we've got questions about the investigation, but we're investigating the investigators, and that's what the Inspector General does. And he got a letter over from Congress. Here's what they sent. They said, from James Comer's office, the Committee on Oversight and Accountability, U.S. House of Representatives, August 22nd, 2023, over to Michael Horowitz, the Inspector General of the DOJ. And previously here, we have seen letters from Congress to people involved in the investigation. So we know David Weiss is the subject of Congress. They want to talk to him. We had 2 FBI agents that got subpoenas and 2 IRS agents that got subpoenas because they were in the investigation. Inspector General Horowitz is not. Here's what his role is. It says, our committees are continuing, Mr. Horowitz, to conduct oversight of programs and operations of the DOJ, the IRS, and the Secret Service within their respective jurisdiction. We've got a lot of problems. IRS had cover-up problems. DOJ had cover-up problems. Secret Service deleted their text messages and so on. We are writing to further understand the scope of the Office of the Inspector General's review of allegations made by the IRS whistleblowers. So it's like an independent agency that kind of governs and investigates things. Think of it like internal affairs in the TV shows. As you're aware, IG, IRS whistleblowers, heroes and shout-outs, Gary Shapley and Joseph Ziegler, made protected disclosures to Congress regarding the DOJ's investigation of Hunter. Specifically, the whistleblowers testified that the DOJ's investigation was purposely slow-walked and subjected to improper and politically motivated interference. Further, the DOJ and the IRS have reportedly engaged in unlawful whistleblower retaliation against the IRS employees. When they spoke out, remember, they all got reassigned. They're like, oh, you're off this case now, sorry. Their testimony raised serious questions about the federal government's commitment to even-handed justice. Comer says, new evidence continues to corroborate whistleblower testimony. The U.S. District Judge in Delaware refused to approve a plea deal that was reached by David Weiss and Hunter's defense team. The plea deal collapsed after the DOJ was forced to admit to the court that Hunter could be open to further investigation. The Oversight Committee exposed further evidence of Joe Biden's role in his family scheme, selling him as, quote, the brand for millions of dollars to foreign nationals, including corrupt oligarchs and Chinese Communist Party linked individuals, footnote 4, a memo from the Oversight Committee. Comer says, Attorney General Garland named U.S. Attorney Weiss, the same guy who is behind the broken, corrupt plea deal, the same guy was the subject of the October 7th meeting where he said, I didn't have authority, but then lied to us and said he did have authority. That guy, the liar. Only after the plea deal with Hunter Biden fell apart. And then Hunter Biden's defense attorneys acknowledged in a court filing that the U.S. Attorney's Office in Delaware did not reach out to engage in settlement discussions until May 2023. Only after the plea deal fell apart did he get appointed. And then Hunter Biden's defense attorneys acknowledged in court that the U.S. attorneys in Delaware did not reach out until May of 2023 for negotiations. What? That's interesting. So they were working on this thing for 5 years and then just this year in May? That is interesting. Wow, interesting. Okay, so why was that in May would they reach out? All right, let's carry on. Notably, on April 19, 2023, so before May, one of IRS whistleblowers, Supervisor Special Agent Gary Shapley, wrote Congress through his attorney seeking whistleblower protections to discuss how the investigation had been hindered by preferential treatment and politics. That's why. That's why. They were going to let this thing just roll. And then they got notice that the whistleblower was bubbling up. Then the DOJ reaches out and says, hey, while we're thinking about this, we might want to negotiate this out. And remember that Weiss also, he did not even want charges originally. They were going to divert the whole case. The DOJ appears to be continuing to sacrifice its professional responsibility to cover for the president's son. So gross. And the president himself. So just to be clear, remember this case was supposed to be bubbling on for 5 years. Investigating. They didn't start negotiating to resolve this until May. Why? April, whistleblowers popped up. They said, we've got to resolve this now because they're going to blow the lid off this whole thing. let's settle it. Then they were going to settle it with diversion, and then they tried to squeeze it through very quickly, and the whole thing went awry. The IRS whistleblowers also provided their protected disclosures to your office, OIG, to the Inspector General. So you know a lot of this. On July 17th, the committees wrote you requesting an update about the status of your investigation based on these disclosures. In your response on July 19th, you acknowledged that Shapley disclosed information to your office. You said this when you responded to us. You said, in undertaking this assessment, we're mindful of the potential limitation on our jurisdiction as a result of the law. This requires my office to refer to the DOJ's Office of Professional Responsibilities misconduct that's alleged within their agency, okay? Oh man, this is your bureaucracy on display. Consistent with our usual practice, when such a potential jurisdictional issue arises, we consult with OPR about the matter. All right, so just to be clear, we're following the chain. Gary Shapley, the whistleblower, writes to Congress, writes to the OIG, says, I've got bad news. Our Department of Justice is very corrupt. The Department of Justice houses the OIG. The OIG is the Office of Inspector General that investigates basically the DOJ. But when it involves an internal allegation of personnel that relate to the exercise of investigations, the OIG can't investigate it, okay? He's got to send it back over to the DOJ and the Office of Professional Responsibility so that they get to investigate themselves. So whistleblower goes to OIG, hey, help us, DOJ's corrupt. Oh, well, I can't help you with that. Go ask the DOJ to investigate their own corruption. So he can't help. So they say, okay, based on your statements and the DOJ's pattern of politically motivated actions, like when this goes back over to the DOJ and they investigate themselves, they're going to say, of course, we did nothing wrong because we've never done anything wrong this whole time. Congress says, that's why we're concerned that the DOJ is limiting your office from fully investigating the disclosures that were provided to you. So even the people who are supposed to do the investigating are corrupted. To help the committees understand the scope of your investigation, so we know what you're actually doing, please provide documents and information sufficient to explain whether your office is limited in any way from investigating the whistleblower disclosures. If you are limited, how are you limited and why are you limited? Please provide this information by September 6, 2023. Great day. Now, thank you for your attention to this matter. Sincerely, your friends in Congress, James Comer, Jim Jordan, Jason Smith, Committee on Ways and Means, over to the Office of the Inspector General. And so even the people who are supposed to be looking into this might have serious problems. And we've got two different theories on what should be done here. Should we let James Comer just to continue to investigate this and let the Republicans slow roll this? And we might be ascending up to the end of a movie where we have a big climactic event and everything gets resolved. And we might see that crest next year around, I don't know, maybe October. We'll see. Comer says, let's keep it slow and steady. We got to be patient. We got to make sure that we are dotting our I's and crossing our T's. Now, we're going to compare and contrast that with Ronny Jackson, representative from Texas, who says, it'd be time to get rid of old Kev McCarthy. First, here is James Comer. He was on Newsmax with Mr. Kelly, Greg Kelly, and here is what he said.
Fake name while you're buying 20 fake shell companies that they use to launder money from our adversaries around the world. So why not use a fake name while you're vice president to disguise the fact that you're coordinating with your son, who, by the way, you said you had a wall between the government side and the business side of Hunter Biden. But this whole thing's a joke, and it's all coming unraveled. It's taken a while to figure out, but we've been following the money. We followed emails, we followed text messages, and we figured out that he was using a fake name pertaining to his preparation to go to Ukraine to fire the prosecutor. And remember, we've seen on tape where Joe Biden said, well, son of a bee, they fired the prosecutor. That's what this was all about. Why was he using a fake name, and why in the world was the government CCing his son to let him know about all the preparation for Ukraine?
So you've reached out to the archives, I believe. We have some of those emails. You just saw them. We got them from the Marco Polo Project, which we trust. They've been very good on this stuff. You think there's a lot more out there, and it doesn't seem, I don't sense that the archives are going to be very cooperative.
Well, we'll see about the archives, but yes, there are more out there, and we believe there are some archives that are public, but they've been redacted. So much of the information I get from the government is redacted. We believe that there are some emails that would fit this pattern that have redactions. So we've asked the National Archives to give us the unredacted version so that we can use this in our investigation to determine whether or not this president is compromised. And I think most of us know the answer to that. But for the mainstream media, we need more evidence. So every day we produce more evidence. And this is another example. So the National Archives is the entity that our committee, the Oversight Committee, has jurisdiction over, that's supposed to be in charge of these records. They've been in the news a lot because both President Trump and President Biden have both been accused of mishandling classified documents. That's through the National Archives. So we want to see if the National Archives is truly a fair entity. They know about this investigation. No. They know the severity of the investigation. They know that the vice president has been accused of taking a bribe. They know there's mounting evidence that the family has received millions and millions of dollars from our adversaries around the world. Now there's emails with that the vice president's office was using to disguise that they were being sent to Joe Biden in a fake name and copying his son, who wasn't an employee of the government. We hear the Democrats say all the time, well, Hunter Biden wasn't in office. Hunter Biden didn't work for the government. Well, why was Hunter Biden getting copied on emails about Ukraine policy when he was the director of a corrupt energy company in Ukraine?
Baby. Yeah, let's look at that email again if we could. From the introduction, baby. We had the email.
Get that money. And, there's all sorts of emails.
Donald Trump calling Zelensky, asking about corruption. It was Joe Biden actually going to Ukraine on Air Force Two,
firing
dangling foreign aid in front of the then president of Ukraine, demanding that he fire a prosecutor that was investigating his son's energy company that was clearly engaged in corruption in Ukraine. And then Vice President Biden accomplished that, probably the only thing he's ever accomplished from a foreign policy standpoint, and then does an interview and brags about it. All the evidence is here. So we're going to continue to press for more information. We believe there's more evidence that's been redacted by the National Archives, and we're calling on them to unredact that and present them to the House Oversight Committee.
It'll be interesting to see if they get them. We went through a very similar back and forth when we were doing this with the FBI. Remember the FD 1023 form? They brought it over. They flashed it. It was redacted. They went back. They brought it back over. It was unredacted. They flashed it even faster. Went back. Then the FBI got a subpoena. Then Christopher Wray hemmed and hawed, and then they brought it and they actually showed him the full document. So we might see something similar like that here. We'll see.
With respect to corruption with Joe Biden in Ukraine, the worse it sounds that Joe Biden continues to request from Congress billions and billions of dollars more to send to Ukraine. I mean, this whole thing stinks. The vice president and the current president of the United States, Joe Biden, has lied for years about his involvement in Ukraine. And here we are sending more and more money to Ukraine. It just looks really bad. And the president is going to have to come clean about what all he did with respect to corruption and bribery in Ukraine.
Well, he's not going to come clean. The question is, are the Republicans going to be able to, squeeze it out of him? And when you start to crack the facade a little bit, you get to see what's inside. And we now know that there were pseudonyms used, Robert L. Peters and other names that Joe Biden was using. And when these emails start to be connected, and I think once we start to uncover what's happening with foreign bank accounts, and I'm really optimistic that there's probably just a treasure trove of data in foreign entities, foreign corporations, foreign bank accounts, that is where most of this happened. I got to imagine these guys were not using the United States rails for most of their nefariousness. They would probably do most of their nefariousness on non-monitorable rails and then bring it on to U.S., LLCs and corporations when they needed to move money around for their own gain, right? Legitimate stuff. Like, in other words, Burisma was the legitimate thing that was supposed to be legitimate, but it wasn't. So what else was happening that's underneath Burisma? It's like that image of an iceberg. Burisma is just what we see on the surface. What else is going on the other rails? And I think that's probably what you'll see in the foreign bank accounts and foreign entities. So the question is, should we go fast? Should we go slow? I know there's a split amongst Republicans. Ronny Jackson, he's a representative over from Texas, and he's making the argument, or at least saying that, at some point we might get a motion to vacate the chair.
McCarthy's going to have to listen to the people on the right, or else he's going to have to rely on the Democrats to pass this. And, they could do that. They did that with the debt ceiling. The more Democrats voted for the debt ceiling than Republicans. They could go down that path again. But I'm telling you, if that happens, I mean, it's going to be detrimental to leadership in the House if they blow off the concerns of the people like myself and Freedom Caucus and some of the other people on the right that are making reasonable demands in this process. It's going to be a problem. continue to rely on the Democrats to pass this important legislation that's coming out of the House. The American people gave us the House back, albeit a small margin here. They gave us the House back because they want to stop the nonsense happening in this country. They want to turn the tide. They want to take this country back. And giving us the House back was the first step. We have an obligation to the people who put us here to do what needs to be done. So I think if we continue to rely on the Democrats to pass important legislation out of the House, it's going to be a real problem for leadership. And I think that the way the rules are set up now, that's inevitable. That's going to happen.
Inevitable that there's going to be a leadership battle. All right, so that's Ronny Jackson and James Comer. Now, they're still sending letters and demanding answers, but we do get some movement out of these. For example, now we know that there were National Archives or are National Archives documents that are redacted that probably have Robert L. Peters' names in there and that include Hunter. And so for many people on the left who continually say there is no connection there, time goes on, the connection seems to solidify, and we'll continue to cover it, my friends. Thank you for subscribing and liking this video wherever you're watching this, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.